All right, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. So I think people are still probably wandering into the chat room. In the meantime, before we get started with what I wanted to do today, which is to talk about abstracts, I just wanted to see where everybody was at in terms of the first lab, which is the ion exchange of glass. So any comments, questions, anything you want to kind of talk about before we get started? Everybody finding the data okay and going through all of that? All right. Okay, that was easy. But if you do have questions, let me know. I haven't heard much from the class, so I'm kind of assuming it's going well. I know I put up a lot of videos this week, some of them longer than others, but obviously this one goes over 2 weeks, and so I wanted you to have enough to start working on the analysis with the Weibull analysis for the 4-point bin data that you're getting. So that's why I added the videos there. So hopefully you can kind of see the whole process from what we have. As far as progress from our end, we have, I believe, one more set to test before we're done with the 4-point from our end. So we're getting really close to that. It might even be done today, but definitely by the beginning of next week, we should be finalized with that. So we're kind of there. And then we will, the week after next, we'll start with the composition, which I just found out yesterday is going to be SEM EDS. So we'll have some videos and probably a live session on that. So stay tuned. I'll get that scheduled for us over the next week. So okay. So now I want to go ahead and start with our discussion for the day. So this is something I kind of wanted some, back and forth on as we talk about abstracts. So I figured this was better for a live session than a pre-recorded. So the first thing that I'm going to have everybody do is if they can go to the sort of document I put up for today's lecture. It looks like a lot of you have already joined it, but it's the one that says MSE 407 S21 Lecture 3. So this one has an abstract, which we're going to go over in a bit, but it also has an area sort of for brainstorming. And so before we talk about an example or a sample abstract, what I want us to do is kind of brainstorm what you all think goes into an abstract or what you've seen in the past. So that's what I'm going to start you with first. And to simplify things, I think what I'll do is instead of trying to break you up into your lab groups, I'm just going to randomly select people for groups. It'll just make it go a little faster. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. But in your little subgroup, breakout groups, what I want you to do is talk with your groups and see what you think should go into an abstract as part of the lab report. Does anybody have any questions? All right, then I'll go ahead and set up some breakout rooms for you. And so you'll get that invitation. And so click that and then join that, and I'll give you about 5 to 10 minutes, then we'll come back and discuss your results, but feel free to write them in the document as well. All right. So it looks like you guys have made some progress in the brainstorming part. So can somebody from each of the groups maybe kind of walk us through what you put down and what you think should go in an abstract?
Our group said that it should be like a summary, like an overall summary of the report with like a little bit of like the experimental like results in there as well. It should kind of have like an intro and conclusion part of it within itself. So kind of just like a small summary that is exciting and will like bring you in what you read to like read the rest of the paper.
Yeah, I think all those points are valid. You know, you with like an intro and conclusion, you know, the big thing is it's not going to be too long. So you know, you don't want to have the same types of intros and conclusions but you'd have in the report. But yeah, you still want to have some type of intro and some type of conclusion, and then you definitely want to summarize the results. Any other groups?
To highlight how you did it, why you did it, and then what you achieved from it, and why that's important, but straight to the point with that.
Yeah, definitely always straight to the point here with that. Here in a second, I'll show you some slides just with, you know, the lab, our kind of guidelines for the abstract. Keep in mind that whatever you're writing for, when an abstract's called for, there's going to be slightly different requirements, but the general features are typically the same. And so, yeah, those three are really good, succinct ways of kind of putting what we have. Any other things? So it doesn't just have to be what's in it, but maybe how, because I see some people kind of added some things like that, other than just the what, but like necessarily how it should be put in there. Any others?
If there are citations, it has to be in the abstract and in the paper.
So say that again, sorry.
Like for citations, they have to be cited in the abstract and then cited again in like the introduction or background.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about abstracts. With the citations, I definitely want to come back to that part here in a second when we go over the slides, because there are typically kind of some, not necessarily hard and fast rules, but there's typically some guidelines to do with what you do with citations. Anything else that we want to add? All right, so I think that's a pretty good, I can kind of see from the brainstorming, you know, you guys have a pretty good list there. So what I want to do now is, I've got a few slides. I don't want this to take a bunch of time. I just want to get through some information in terms of, you know, our abstracts and what we're looking for. And I try to give you the general stuff and then talk a little bit about the specifics that we have for the lab. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with that. All right. So I just have some introductory stuff, and this is using the example of the short lab report that I put in for the kind of the guidelines, a sample. So this full paper, the short lab report, can be found in the Canvas folder. So you can find this, the whole thing, if you want to look at it. But the first thing, and probably the most important part of the abstract, is that it's got to be concisely written. So that's the general rule. And for us, what that means is 200 words or less. I will say that I don't often count the words. You know, I'm looking for generalities for the most part. So I'm not going to go in there and you have 201, and so you're wrong, you get 0 points. It's going to be more about what you have in it. Is it concisely written? Than that exactly. When it starts to take up a lot of the page, it becomes noticeable. But I'm not going to nitpick for most lab reports when it comes to the 200 word limit. But yeah, so on mine, I've got 150 here. Going back and rewriting it, there might be some things I end up adding, but yeah, I think the main thing here is concisely written, less than 200 words. And then I kind of phrase, and this is how I do it in the guidelines, phrase the different parts that I want to put in the abstract in terms of like answering the statements about what the authors did. So for the most part, that's you guys are the author, but that's what you're kind of asking yourself. So the first question that you want to answer is why they did what they did. So this is kind of what I refer to as the motivation. So it's it can sometimes be difficult, I think, for students to get this one. I think this is probably the one that we have some of the biggest problems, because I think the motivation is often, I want to get an A and I'm following the directions of the lab, right? So that's obviously, that can be your true motive. But here, what I mean is what connects it to greater, like everyday scenarios, real life applications, or the sort of scientific community. Where does this fit in to that greater understanding? So you want to, so a lot of times with this motivation, we're using materials that are used every day. And so you might mention, this is an application, this is why we care about these properties that we're studying. So it's along those lines. And so basically, I tried to highlight the sections in the abstract that kind of answer this. And here in this abstract, this is one where I would have liked a little bit, even though I wrote this, I would have liked a little bit more connection to like the greater kind of understanding of this topic. So this was about nanoparticles supported on carbon, but I didn't really mention that this is used in things like catalysis for fuel cells and things like that. So if I had rewrote this, I probably would add something like that. We're doing this for a greater understanding of that and how it fits in this process. So here's your kind of opportunity to be fairly broad and talk about applications that are, or just scientific knowledge in our community that's useful, and how that connects with the research that we're doing. So that's the first part. So this is also purpose. So I think I saw on the brainstorming, you guys told me purpose. And so this is where that fits in. So, it can be, there can be motivation, but there can also be more specifically the purpose of the experiment. And so it's useful to connect those two as well. All right. And then, yeah, like I mentioned, I would probably add a bit more of a statement here about what these materials are used for, because not everybody that reads this is coming from the same background. And so they that point is useful to add. All right, so then the second part, and I think this is maybe something I didn't see quite as much in the brainstorming document, but it's basically, how did they do what they did? So you did task, right? You did an experiment. So how did you do that? And so this is kind of also known as procedures. So, very generically, what materials did you use? What general equipment or techniques did you use to study the materials that you did? And so this is one where, again, I'm not looking for detailed procedures. For the most part, I'm just looking for the techniques, the generic techniques. So the example on here, on this example, is that, I wanted to study size, shape, and dispersion. I also did carbon burn-off, which gave me this thing. I did transmission electron microscopy to give me morphology, and then I have a finding. So, basically carbon burn off is a technique I used. TEM is a technique I used. And so you can just, all you really have to do here, you don't have to go in super detail. All you really have to do is say, you know, the techniques that you used, and then you can briefly say why, right? That's all you need. And so that's, again, with all of these things, you want to be concise. All right. So yeah, it doesn't have to be a book. Just make sure it's has all the basic information that you need. Okay. And then in terms of results are going to be the kind of foundation of the abstract. So this is another thing that I think people do a lot, and not just students. I find that a lot of papers that you look at, if you read their abstracts, they fall into the same trap as well. And the trap is, you know, it's not sort of a jacket cover for a novel. It's not, you know, you're not trying to make people buy the article. So for my, you know, there's nothing suspenseful about it. So don't feel like you can't put results in it, right? You want to actually put your results. If they really are interested, they have to read the article anyway, right? You can't just take one little blip and be like, I'm done. You know, I've read it all. I know everything. So don't try to be suspenseful and just say, we got good results. You know, you got to actually put what those results are. So don't make it a suspense novel. And so here I just kind of outlined some of the results that I had for this short lab report. They should also be, for the most part, results that you get will be quantitative. So that means, you know, directly have numbers, right? This isn't true for all studies that people do, right? Sometimes there are not specific numbers that you can quote, but almost everything that we do, there will be, right? So a big thing I can do when I look at abstracts is if I look through it and there's no numbers, then, you know, something's wrong, right? Because I can immediately say that you're not fully representing the data that you have, right? Because we're going to have numbers, right? This current study that we're doing, we're going to have a lot of numbers to do with the glass flexural strength and things like that. So make sure you have quantitative results. And then lastly, you want to summarize. And so you kind of take your results and summarize that and come to any conclusions that you can. And so I tried to kind of put all the stuff together to kind of say, if we, in this case for this experiment, if we adjust the pH, we can control the morphology, we can control the size. And so that's kind of our overarching conclusion for this result. So you want to kind of put everything that you just, not just put the numbers of what we did, but also what does that mean? What conclusions can you make? And this, you know, from your experiment, you know, you came up with hypotheses and then did it meet that? And those conclusions based on those hypotheses can, you know, also be used for this. Did the things that you were expecting to happen, right? Those are kind of the greater conclusions for the results. And so they kind of tie the whole experiment together. Okay, so that's kind of my generic presentation, just to kind of show you what we're looking for in an abstract, right? And so I think most of you touched on these points. So there's nothing too groundbreaking. I do like the point that some of you made about, you know, you don't want it to be too boring, right? So if you can kind of draw somebody's interest, do that. And a lot of times I believe that's through motivation. So, you know, you're talking about the flexural strength of glass rods, but like maybe give people an application. Why is this useful? You know, talk about that. And so there's other things to do there. And then the, let me try one more thing. Okay, I thought I had a slide on this, but apparently I didn't. So the citations thing. So generally speaking, you'll have citations throughout your report. And as you go along, if you cite a certain fact or something, you'll cite that specific reference. Generally speaking, again, this is the general rule for abstracts. Generally speaking, you want to try to avoid citations, so outside references in the abstract. It's not sort of the end all, of abstracts, but it's a general rule that you want to try to avoid the citing of outside references in an abstract. So that's kind of our general rule. So it's best if you can avoid it. So kind of if you go around and look at abstracts, you'll typically avoid putting those in. Every once in a while, you'll find it if they think it's really necessary. For example, some studies are basically directly trying to reproduce another set of work, right? And so then you might have to cite that. But in general, if you can avoid it, you want to try to avoid those, because typically people are not seeing the references form, they're just seeing the abstract when they look online and so forth. So generally speaking, we want to try to avoid it. Okay, so that's all the kind of the slides I had for abstracts. Any questions, comments that you had about what should go in it, how it should be formatted, anything like that? Nothing? Too early? Okay. All right. So now what I have, the last part I have for us is, as you recall, I put an abstract in that same document. So it looks like some of you have already kind of started to read it and so forth, but basically what I want us to do is kind of look over this abstract. It's an abstract from a real paper. In fact, it's Nature. So if you know anything about journals, Nature is a very good journal. So and it's actually a fairly groundbreaking study. So what I want us to do is go over this and then basically thinking about what we just talked about and what you guys brainstormed earlier. Not necessarily just say good or bad, but like, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? What would you change? And so if you can spend a few minutes and go over that. So I won't break you up into groups because you probably want to read it by yourself instead of in a group. So if you just kind of take a few minutes to go over this and kind of ask the question, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? If you want to add those comments to the second portion of the document, and then once everybody's done, we'll kind of go through it and discuss what you guys have. So I'll give you a few minutes, and then we'll come back together. I'll just leave everybody in this room. So yeah, read through it, and then we will discuss. All right, so hopefully all of you have had a chance to look through most of it at least, but I want to go ahead and make sure we have time to discuss. So tell me what you think. So what are some of the big takeaways that you had?
I thought it felt too long. Like you struggle to stay interested when it's that long and like detailed.
Yeah, the for me, the fact that it takes up the whole page, basically the whole page, you know, that's pretty long. I don't know specifically about nature, but generally, I feel like this would have been flagged by a lot of journals. So I just don't know nature specifically because I've never been good enough to have my stuff there. But yeah, it just seems really, really long. I was going to do a word count real quick, but here it is. 306, if I've got that correct. So, you know, definitely for our purposes, you know, that's too long. So if it's too long, what do we think should be kind of cut out, or what do we think is unnecessary for this abstract?
Given the audience, there shouldn't be much background.
Yeah, so that's definitely one of my, I see a comment about the, you know, how it's kind of giving a history and, you know, giving like a definition of superconductors. So for me, yeah, I would say, you know, that's something that you can cut out. I don't think we need a lot of background. I think some people probably struggle writing abstracts for these journals because they're trying to, part of getting to the high impact journals like Nature and Science is that you try to appeal to a general audience, or at least scientific audience. And so that's probably what they were going for, but I think maybe a little too far for them. But again, we don't necessarily know, you know, the specific journal may have other requirements. So, you know, kind of framing this in the with it being for our class basically. But yeah, too long, probably too much background and history to go into it. What else? Anything good that you like about it?
I think the last half is pretty good. I think if you just cut down the theory a bit more and then get rid of the background, it's pretty solid.
Yeah, so the second half, right? That's where most of the results, if I'm remembering correctly, are, and some of the kind of some of the procedures. So yeah, so I think that's the important half. But yeah, I think maybe they're trying to pick up people that aren't in that field, but I think maybe they do too much with that. I think they could definitely make it more concise, even if they want to keep some of the things there. Any other comments we want to kind of go over with this one? So I see one about the procedural details. I do want to hit this one. I've got a couple slides just kind of going over mine, my kind of takeaways from it. And I think that's an interesting point, the procedural aspects there. So any last comments we want to make on this? All right, so I've just got a couple slides and then we'll be done with this, but I do want to kind of show you, again, my kind of my takeaways from this. And this isn't to say that, you know, yours are better or worse than mine or anything like that. I just want to show you what I saw. And again, I think a lot of them are the same. So you'll see some replication here. If I can share my screen, there we go. Okay, so here is the same thing. So I'll just go over it. So again, it looks like I counted the words differently when I did it. So it's 314. I'm not sure. It could just be the citations that are there and how the formatting comes off. But yeah, it's long. For our purposes, I think it's too long. I feel like for most journals, it's actually too long as well. The good things I would say is that they don't make you guess, right? So the suspense novel thing that I kind of mentioned, they're not doing that. They're telling you what the results are, even if they're kind of buried at the end. But they do tell you what their results are. So I kind of highlighted what I thought were their results. So they have kind of predictions, and then what actually happens, how they did it, and then what the results. So they have some there in this portion. So they have a detailed importance, and this is, you can see how much I've highlighted here. So this probably goes too far, but they do kind of highlight the importance of why they're doing what they're doing. They kind of tell you how it fits in the current understanding of superconductors. So they're talking about conventional superconductors and how this fits in there. And so, that is important, but I think they probably, again, this is kind of background. And so I think you can limit this kind of information in the abstract. They give the results, so I'm kind of highlighting the same thing. So this is the, what they did part. And I think they highlight it, even if it kind of is towards the bottom and after a pretty large chunk of other stuff. So this is, in terms of techniques, I think they are a little unclear about the techniques that they use. So you see that they talk about a pressure of 90 gigapascals. They do talk about magnetic susceptibility measurements. So that's one thing, but they also talk about this like isotope shift. So I think a little bit more on this would obviously be useful. You don't have to have that whole chunk of paragraph to talk about it, but I think it would be a little bit more useful. And I think if you kind of go and read this paper, one thing that you'll find is that a lot of their experimental setup is kind of built in their lab. So it's not an out of the box, SEM or something like that they just use. And so part of the paper actually goes over the experimental setup. So they kind of view that as results. And so I think that might be where the differences come in, why they're not giving you some of that information. But they do kind of give a clear statement of conclusions. They talk about how their study kind of fits into the greater kind of mechanism and so forth, and gives you the importance. So yeah, I think you guys kind of addressed the same comments that I did in terms of what we're looking for. And I think that was a pretty good summary of what the abstract actually was. Okay, so that's basically, I wanted to have this kind of a little bit of a group exercise for abstracts and what goes in them. So does anybody have any comments about this or just anything related to the class? We've got a couple minutes here if you have any questions. All right, well, so next week is a continuation of this week. So I've kind of given you, us and you guys 2 weeks to work on this 4-point, because I know there's a lot of data with that. So next week will be kind of more of the same. So you definitely should be, at this point, working through that data. I've given you the worksheet. It is up there if you haven't seen it already. And I asked you certain questions, but even if I haven't asked you questions, you should be working through all the data. And if you don't want to do it all by yourself, make sure you're kind of splitting the work up. That could definitely help kind of ease the load on everybody's plate for this. And like I said, I believe we have one more data set to upload, and that should be up there by, I believe, Monday at the latest, depending on when it snows. But yeah, it should definitely be up there early next week. And so you should have all of the data that you need. So yeah, so that's what we'll be doing. And then keep a lookout for emails and so forth. I'll try to let you know if we schedule anything live for the SEM lab. I'm working with the EM Center right now to try to get that going. So it's a little late, but I'm hoping that we can have at least like an hour session live with Nico to kind of go over how the data is collected. So yeah, so if there isn't anything else, I'll leave it there, and have a good rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Goodchill, I actually did have a quick question.
Sure.
I was having trouble finding the data.
Okay. Have you been able to access the Google Share folder?
Yes, I'm in the MSE 407 folder.
Okay. And so then there's a 407 Lab 1 folder within that. Do you see that
Okay.
one?
Yeah.
Okay, so in here, there's a lot of stuff. So there's stuff like previous reports that I uploaded at the beginning. And then, you know, you're welcome to put, you know, if you have your own group materials, it looks like group 1 did that. And then the 2 that I uploaded that have all the data is either data. So data is basically at this point just the 4-point bend if you click on it. And then in that folder, it gives you all of those files that we took from the Instron computer. And then other data will also be in the photos. So if I took pictures of the lab notebook or the class as it, you know, throughout the process, I put it in the folder, the photos folder, and tried to kind of subdivide it into meaningful increments.
I'm only seeing the group 1 folder.
Let me see. I think I can look and see if everybody's in it. Yeah, I don't. Sometimes the sharing privileges are get kind of mixed up. Let me resend the link and just see if how that goes. Maybe I'll send it directly through Google and see if that works. So is your email AJWO237?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll send it to that. And part of the issue that we've had in the past is that if I try to set this up with my UKY email, it doesn't like that. And so it's actually my personal Gmail. And that's the only way I've found to be able to share things effectively. Otherwise, you have to have a very specific type of email address. So I just sent it again.
I just got an email.
Okay, so maybe, I mean, that's the best I can come up with is do that or try refreshing the website, because I've had sometimes when we upload stuff, I have to kind of upload it again or refresh the site. But other than that, I hope it works because I'm not an expert at this stuff, so I'm hoping that will work.
Yeah, that worked.
Okay. Yeah, so if stuff like that comes up, just let me know as quick as possible. I'll try to I think it's just the like the user privileges and stuff like that are sometimes mixed up because people add things and so hopefully that sounds like that helps. So so just let me know if it pops up again. So
all right, have a good weekend.
You too.